If you've ever dabbled with building or licensing a Windows server, I'm sure you've concluded your research by wishing that you could get the last few hours of your life back. I've been there before, and that's why I'm here to make a video about it. Microsoft licensing is anything but simple, so I'm going to try to break it down into simple, understandable terms so you can get on with managing your business and your IT systems. So to get started, there are 4 editions of Windows Server 2012 R2. Those are, from most expensive to least expensive, Data Center, Standard, Essentials, and Foundations. Each copy of each edition covers a certain number of physical processors in the server, as well as some user licenses and virtualization rights, which probably is not what you think it is. Before we get into what those mean, let's define some terms, and those will be important to help us out throughout this video. So the first one, virtualization rights, also referred to as virtual OSEs, stands for Virtual Operating System Environment, or virtual OSE. This refers only to that server OS being virtualized on top of itself. So let's say you purchased Windows Server Standard. Well, now you run 2 Windows Server Standard virtual machines on top of that one Windows Server Standard. That's all it means. It has nothing to do with desktop virtual machines running on that server. When a Windows Server 2012 license says it comes with 2 virtual licenses or 2 virtual OSEs, it does not mean you can only have 2 virtual machines running on that server total. Like I just said, it means it's just that server that's running on the server, and not like desktop or other Hyper-V machines you would like to have on there. When I first looked into building a Windows Server 2012 R2 box to virtualize some Windows desktops, I got confused by that, and I thought I would have to buy another Windows Server license for every single pair of Windows desktop VMs that I was going to be running on it. And that is not the case. Although, on a side note, you do need to still pay for a Windows desktop license, like Windows 10, Windows 7, whatever, for each one of the computers you're going to be running in a VM. So don't let the term virtualization rights confuse you, because it only applies to servers. Now the second term is RDS. That stands for Remote Desktop Services. This is going to be important when we talk about licensing later on. The third one is CAL, or C-A-L, stands for Client Access License. Although there are regular CALs and RDS CALs, they both simply allow users to connect to services provided by that server. 4. There are tiers of licensing for Windows Server 2012 R2. There are 3 tiers of licensing that would be required depending on what you want to do. Your first and most simple tier is just the basic Windows Server 2012 R2 license that you buy from Newegg or your provider. Some deployments will not need any more licensing than just that. The second tier, though, is called Base CALs, CALs. These would be to license additional processors, virtual OSEs, or users. Only Windows Server 2012 Data Center and Standard require user or device CALs out of the box, whereas Essentials and Foundation come with some user and device CALs out of the box. Where is she?
Behind the tree that you're standing in front of.
The Essentials and Foundation versions come with 25 and 15 CALs out of the box, respectively. More can be added if needed, so don't think that if you have a business of 30 employees that you have to go to Standard version instead of Essentials version. So the third tier is called Additive CALs, sometimes referred to as Premium Services. These include Remote Desktop Services and Active Directory Rights Management Service. They're sold separately and could be needed at the same time on the same server, but not everybody's going to need them. For example, if you purchase an Active Directory Rights Management CAL, but you want to run desktops in virtual machines on Hyper-V on the same server, you're also going to need to purchase RDS CALs. So the fifth one, User CAL versus Device CAL. These base CALs are used to license users connecting to services provided by your server. After buying a CAL, it covers connections even to virtual OSEs on that same box. So one CAL covers connections to any of those devices on there. Like let's say you have Windows Server Standard and then you have a standard virtual machine providing some services. That one CAL works for both of those. A user CAL is for users that will be accessing the server from multiple devices, and a device CAL is for multiple users that are going to be using one device to connect to it. So to keep you from having to buy multiple licenses for one employee that has a bunch of different devices, they made a user CAL so that you can just license that one employee and be done with it. But imagine you've got one computer in a warehouse that's accessed by 5 different employees on different shifts. you don't want to have to license every single employee, so you just license that one desktop. They are two CALs, do the same purpose, but they're for different situations so that you don't have to spend too much money if one situation suits you better. So back to the different editions and what comes with each. The names generally explain who they're geared towards, but I'm going to elaborate a little bit more. Data Center costs about $4,600 and is designed for medium to large businesses that would be using their Windows Server in a data center or a large deployment situation. It comes with unlimited virtual OSE rights and two physical CPU licenses. There are no user, device, or RDS CALs included with this package. That means if you buy a data center license and you have 200 employees accessing services provided by that server, you need to license every single connection with CALs. Whether you decide to use user or device CALs is completely up to you and your current situation. If you decide to also run a Hyper-V server on that server, you need an RDS CAL for each remote connection in addition to your regular base CALs. Standard Edition costs about $695 and it's a pretty good offering for small to medium businesses. It comes with virtualization rights for two OSEs, covers two physical CPUs, and comes with no user or device or RDS CALs. Just like with Data Center, you have to purchase all of those separately. Essentials Edition costs roughly $400 and is a sweet spot for small businesses. It comes with two physical CPU licenses, one virtual OSE, although that OSE can only run the Windows Server Essentials software package, and 25 regular user CALs. That means that with Essentials, you don't have to buy any base CALs until you exceed 25 users. You can add CALs to your Essentials Edition to increase the number of users, so don't be afraid if you have 30 or 40 users that you suddenly have to upgrade server versions or editions. And this edition does not come with RDS CALs. Finally, there's Foundations Edition. It will run you about $200, but good luck finding it anywhere. I had to search 4 online retailers before I finally found it, and it's meant to come pre-installed on OEM machines. That's why it's really hard to find. It has no virtual OSE rights, covers one physical CPU, and has 15 user CALs bundled with it. This would be ideal for a very small business that just needs some simple services from it. So here's an example of a situation I've been faced with multiple times. I want to install a small business server to virtualize a few desktop computers and to run Active Directory in a small office of roughly 10 staff using Hyper-V. Which licenses do I have to get? Let's assume the server has 2 physical processors, 4 desktops are going to be virtualized, and it's going to be using RemoteFX for optimal responsiveness. I'll need to purchase 1 copy of Windows Server 2012 R2 Essentials and 4 Windows Server 2012 RDS CALs. To my knowledge, they're only sold in 5 packs, so keep that in mind. Remember that the OS license for Essentials comes with 25 base CALs, so we don't have to purchase any of those right off the bat until we exceed 25. In order to use remote sessions hosted on Hyper-V, though, we're going to need 1 RDS license per connection back to the server. You need to decide if it will be cheaper to purchase an RDS user CAL or an RDS device CAL, just the same way you would purchase a user or device base CAL. So here's another scenario. I need an Active Directory server for my company of roughly 200 employees. I could choose 2 different options in this case. If I only need a server for Active Directory, then I'll purchase an Essentials Edition and get the appropriate base CALs to cover the additional users above 25. The second option is if I want to use that same server for more than just Active Directory on the same physical box. While it's not recommended to run more than one mission-critical service on the same physical computer, I can completely understand having to do it because of your budget. In this case, I would buy a Standard Edition license and purchase enough base CALs to cover all of the users. So to recap on all this, just remember that Microsoft loves licensing everything. If you think it needs a license, it probably needs a license. There are 3 tiers of licensing to consider for your server, with each one being geared for more specialized situations than the previous. If you want to virtualize your employees' desktops on your server, you'll need an RDS CAL for each connection, a base CAL for each user or device, and your regular OS license. If your server has more than the allotted physical CPUs, you'll have to buy an additional OS license to cover that too. So let's say you have 4 CPUs, you're going to have to buy 2 server licenses. I got all of this information from official Microsoft white papers, and I've linked them in the video description below. If you would like us to tackle the project of installing a server or licensing it properly at your business, check us out at cobaltridge.com to see what we can do for you.